Bulletproof Radio, a state of high performance.
You're listening to Bulletproof Radio with Dave Asprey. Today, we are going to talk about some root causes of disease and talk to a really interesting guy who tapped into some of Tesla's technology in order to generate some new stuff that does something in the gut that I haven't really seen before. Someone who's been for 22 years working on this field that we now call biohacking, that you could have called alternative medicine, some other things like that. He's a guy who's written several books and really zoomed in on why disease and longevity start in the gut and ways you probably haven't heard of to keep your gut healthy. His name is Dr. Edward Group. Edward, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Dave. Really appreciate it. It's an honor to be on your show.
And you've done so many things, an 18-day water fast. We're going to get into that. Ozone stem cells, Wim Hof breathing, spiritual stuff, and you're friends with Dr. Mercola and Jim Quick. So we run in similar circles, but this is your first time on the show. So I think we can go in a lot of different directions. And wherever we go is going to be interesting. Quite interesting for people listening. And you have 25 million views on your YouTube channel, so people who haven't heard of your work can find you pretty easily. Best place to find you is just go to YouTube, search Edward Group. What's the best way?
Dr. Group on YouTube.
Dr. Group on YouTube. All right. So basically, guys, this is someone who has a big voice in healing and is worth paying attention to. The thing that caught my eye about your work that was really interesting was you sent me a bottle of Oxy Powder. And now, people who've known the show for a long time have heard me talk about having a Reif machine and some of the original Tesla stuff. And Tesla was a biohacker in addition to being a pretty interesting inventor in many different fields, not including electric cars. If you're under 20, no, Tesla did not invent electric cars. Just kidding. Anyway, I tried the Oxy Powder, and it was something I actually didn't know about, which is unusual because I'm very well read on supplements and all this. You're actually ozonating magnesium. What's the deal with that? Tell me what it is and how it works. What does it do to the gut?
Well, if I could give you a little bit of a backstory on how
Sure.
I came across Oxy Powder. I was part of a research team in the mid-'90s. Before that, actually, I wanted to be a heart surgeon, and I was about to take my MCATs. And I ended up meeting this guy at a dinner, and he was part of this alternative, what he said was the first alternative oncology research team. And this was before internet, really, in the mid-'90s, so there wasn't a lot of access to look up research and find out what was going on. And we kind of got in a little bit of an argument because I was at that time, brainwashed, trained in allopathic, and he was the complete opposite. And so he said to me, look, go prove to me that any pharmaceutical does any good or addresses the root cause of what someone is suffering from instead of addressing the symptoms. And so I took him up on that offer and went to the library the next day. And I started breaking down, because I had a background in chemistry and biochemistry, and started looking at the structure and the function of pharmaceuticals. And it didn't take that long before I realized, oh my gosh, what is going on here? And it was very shocking for me to learn that information. And so I went back to him and I said, teach me everything you know. And he said, well, join my research team. He was working with MD Anderson at that time. That was when MD Anderson had a 4% success rate with cancer, and they were bringing in not only MD Anderson, but the cancer hospitals were bringing in the CAM programs, the complementary alternative medicine program. So I joined his team, and it was, oh my gosh, that was the most eye-opening research, because we had to go to these underground meetings and talk to these cancer doctors and try to pull as much. Our mission was to, number one, find the root cause of cancer, identify what that was, and second, evaluate all these doctors' natural protocols and see what was working, what wasn't working, any type of natural therapeutics that could be brought in. And so, long story short, we met underground with these doctors, and we were studying Laetrile, and we were studying 714X, and it was a very small world. I mean, back then, doctors, yeah.
Let's define this for people. Laetrile, I mean, you know what that is. Guys, this is basically an extract of apricot seeds that's a cyanide molecule attached to some other stuff that has been shown in some studies, but not all, to go into cells that are cancerous. And then the cyanide breaks off from the rest of the stuff because of an enzyme in the cancer, and then it kills the cancer cells. And it's been just shat upon and fought against by traditional medicine for reasons I don't know. Maybe it doesn't work, and they all know that because they studied it, except they didn't study it. I think it's one of those cases of that can't be, therefore it isn't kind of logic, which is unscientific, but is rampant in Western medicine. So you studied Laetrile. Did it work in your studies?
It was one thing. I mean, the doctors that had the most success rate were not only using one thing, but a combination of things. And that's what also led us into Royal Raymond Reif, because at the time we met the guy that actually had about a quarter of the stuff that was taken out of Reif's original lab, which was then given to me. So I actually owned, until a couple years ago, some of Reif's original equipment and his original lab manual. And that was...
Let's pause and say who Royal Reif is, because a large number of listeners may not know about his background. Do you want to go through it? You want me to?
Yeah, sure. In short, Royal Raymond Reif was a scientist that was doing research and had developed what he called the light microscope, which could view live organisms at very high magnification. Not only that, when he started organizing and documenting all the organisms, he also found that organisms had the ability to change between a virus to a fungus to a bacteria, which he called pleomorphism, which is still not well understood today, but is another reason why we'll talk about later. It's so important to clean all the harmful organisms and the parasites out of your body. And he actually identified what he called the BX virus, which also transformed into a fungus. And at that point in time, he found that he was really into frequencies and vibrations, which is ultimately what healing is, and what we're made of is nothing more than vibrations. And so he developed a Reif frequency device. And this device, he could tune in to the frequency of these microorganisms, and under the microscope, he would see that those organisms would shatter. And he was very successful with cancer. He almost had I think it was a 99.8% success rate. And then he was shut down, he was raided, and a lot of his equipment was damaged, taken to unknown locations. And we were fortunate actually to have and to study that. And with Barry Lyons, the guy that wrote The Cancer Cure That Worked, we also were studying the Reif machines at the time, which he was using a helium gas quartz tube with platinum-based electrodes.
Now, I would just encourage you, if you're listening to this and you've never heard of Royal Reif, do some digging around on the internet, and you're going to find a bunch of people say, quackery, quackery. However, it is well documented that Morris Fishbein, if I remember his last name right, the founder of the American Medical Association, tried to buy his tech. Amongst other things, Reif had made 5 microscopes that could see up to electron microscope level living organisms, whereas even today, electron microscopes kill everything and kind of desiccate it before we can look at it. And when he wouldn't sell to Morris, within 2 years, Morris used the power of a medical mafia called the AMA in order to, I think they might call it a protectionist trade organism instead of a trade organization instead of mafia today. I'm not sure. Anyhow, the AMA defends doctors' ability to charge a lot of money and hasn't done a lot of good in a lot of time, as far as I can tell. I'm sure they have done some good. I just don't know what it is because they're holding some progress back. But at the very roots of that organization, they took a type of medical technology and they literally sent people in. They burned his lab books. They destroyed the microscopes when it wasn't for sale to the head of the AMA. No, I'm not making this up. This is what, the 1930s? Edward, do you remember the decade
Yes.
We're talking about? The 30s?
Yes, 1930s.
And the reason that I am actually willing to have you on the show and all this is that when I had Lyme disease and I had actually toxic mold, which is almost always the cause of Lyme disease, and I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue and diagnosed with fibromyalgia and all sorts of other weird stuff that really sucked. I bought a Reif machine and I was not sure which of the 10,000 frequencies to run. So I had limited results, but my partner at the time, she had herpes lesions in her sinuses. And without telling her what I was doing, she was reading a magazine sitting 10 feet away from this thing that, changes the EMF environment to be hostile to organisms. I put in the herpes, which is a cold sore, the herpes frequencies, which are well known. And I hit start. And she screams, drops the magazine, grabs her face and says, stop, whatever you're doing. Oh my God. Now, there was no placebo there. She didn't know what I was doing. She was not paying attention to what I was doing. And it was like someone smacked her in the face. That is because there was a direct interaction between the Reif EMFs that it was making and what was going on in her sinuses. And that is science. And it was reproducible. And she was terrified that I would turn it on again. So I didn't, because I'm nice. Anyhow, I just want you guys to know there's stuff you can do. And if you're really curious about this, then a newer version of that stuff, there was an episode about the biocharger where Jim Law was on recently, which is using, like you said, charged neon gas as well as a bunch of other gas. So this is real stuff. It does have biological effects and it's happening. It's just something you probably haven't heard of. So don't want to go on a long thing there, but I want people to be grounded in how interesting it is that you had some of Royal Reif's original gear or books, because they're rare, because they were hunted down and destroyed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was to the point where I actually donated them about 5 years ago to Steve Ross at the World Research Foundation, just because I felt kind of weird holding all that stuff. But I tell you, when I had his lab manual in my hand and going through it and all of his letters and handwritten stuff, it was pretty amazing considering what he has done. But that also led us to ozone and oxygen therapies during this root cause of disease and therapeutic search. And that's kind of where we stumbled on Tesla's information. Most people don't know, but Tesla was really, really, really into health. And Tesla's understudy was a guy named Arthur Matthews. Arthur Matthews came to Tesla when he was 16 years old and studied under Tesla. And great book, by the way, The Wall of Light, which talks about Tesla's other side. But Tesla apparently had this vision that he saw into the future, and he told Arthur Matthews' understudy, by the way, was a guy named George Freebot, and I was the understudy of George Freebot. So we had access to some of Tesla's original things, and there was another guy up in Canada, actually, that had a lot of Tesla stuff that we worked with, and he actually built a full-size Tesla coil. And so we were studying all different types of therapeutics at that time and seeing what worked. And we heard about this vision that Tesla had, and Tesla said, in the future, all disease will start in the gut. And one of the things he wanted to do before he died was he wanted to develop a product that would release oxygen, what he called ozol, which is an ozone plus a terpene molecule, which Tesla invented with his Vapozone machine, which we can talk about, which is absolutely fabulous. They used to sell it at Sears, Roebuck and Company in, I think, the 1940s, which produces ozol. But also, he wanted to be able to stabilize a monatomic oxygen onto a magnesium compound. And so he met with the guy in a hotel room. The guy's name was Dr. Eugene Blas in 1898, and they developed a product that was an oxygenation-based product that delivers negative electrons and that would oxidize and reduce any of the hard compacted fecal matter or anything harmful in the intestines, the full 30 feet of intestines, by the way. There was a time release that would keep the intestines clean and keep the intestines healthy. Now, when we looked at, and what Tesla looked at, was any type of the so-called colon cleansers or intestinal cleansers or anything like that are being used, such as Cascara Sagrada and some other things that don't really oxidize or actually clean any of the intestinal process.
All right, Edward, you piqued my curiosity. So I looked up the book you were talking about here while we're doing the interview. And it's actually got something about how Nikola Tesla communicated with the Venusians from Venus. So as soon as I looked at that as a book from 1973, of course I had to order the $210 antique version of it because that's all that they really have. And I put on my brand new True Dark glasses, the new Fairlane model, my new ones, to protect my eyes from the Venus rays. And my tinfoil hat is actually under my hair. So This is one of the problems. Anytime you go into Tesla and you go into Reif and you go into like the history of this stuff, you always come across aliens, wizards, dragons, druids, all of which have actual historical things that, ancient Chinese medicine talked about dragons, and, all the old religions had stuff like this. But why is it always so weird? Like couldn't they have written a book about Tesla and Reif without the Venus people? What's going on with that? What's your take on all this stuff?
It's just an interesting book. It's a very interesting book to read. And, I don't doubt it. Arthur Matthews Tesla was a strange guy. It's the universe. It's the totality of consciousness. It's the energy. It's the vibrations. Einstein said everything in life is vibration. Tesla said, if you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy and vibration. So, who knows? I do believe that there's life on other planets and in the universe, and he just had his own way of doing things. And gosh, too bad most of his stuff has been suppressed.
Yeah, it's a weird thing where I know for a fact that there are certain people who just know stuff. And I know for a fact because I happen to run a neuroscience institute where we can measure the brains of people who can just know stuff. And magically, they have a common pattern that's very unusual in the rest of us. And people who meditate a lot are more likely to have that. So there are small subsets of people who tune into stuff, whether you want to call it collective consciousness from Jung or, way more esoteric. Yes, I'm channeling someone from Venus or an angel or whatever. I've had a few people on the show who are psychic, for lack of a better word. There's enough scientific evidence from a couple of guests I've had on the show who are researching it with proper medical science, saying, well, look, these are things that are statistically very unlikely unless some few people can do a few things, and the outliers are where all the cool stuff is. I'm going to reserve my judgment and my skepticism about whether Reif or Tesla were actually talking to Venus or not. But I will say both of them sure knew a lot of stuff, and they were tuned into some pretty crazy stuff. And I'm not going to say that I know enough to say that it was or wasn't wherever the heck it came from, but it probably wasn't just all between their ears. Could be wrong. So I'm going to read about Venus, which is great. Okay, I got to ask you this now. So Edward, are you talking to anyone from Venus?
No, I'm not, but I'm actually really, really into meditation. Kind of like you, when you did when you went raw vegan, I did the same thing. Probably about 10 years ago, I been studying meditation and spirituality from all over the world, and just constantly, like you've been on a search for the truth. Just being a truth seeker and never believing the first thing that you see or hear. And so I decided to do a 1.5 years of abstinence from sex and raw vegan diet, raw food diet, and meditation of 2 to 4 hours a day. That was one period of my life that, the meditation I can say was extremely powerful. Yeah. The raw vegan diet, I felt like isolated from society. My body wasn't. Yeah, I would not recommend that to anybody. I think everybody's biochemistry is different, and it was. It was really strange. I felt like I was just by myself, and I learned a lot that you really need to interact with people, and you learn that you stop getting invited to parties or dinners or anything because you're not drinking alcohol, you're not eating, and you become secluded like a hermit. But the meditation was transformative. And to that day, I still wake up at 2:30 or 3 in the morning and try to meditate till 6:30, at least, 2 or 3 hours a day. Of course, I've worked up to that over the years. And like you talk so much about, hacking the aging process. And it's just amazing to me what meditation does with all the studies, how it balances everything out, how it energizes the system, how it heals. It's just it's done a lot for me, because most successful people that you and I know are ADD and I don't think
It
that's
happens.
any type of a disease at all. I think it's actually a benefit that we're able to live a life like that. But yeah, so meditation is great, and the big thing about meditation that I've been studying over the last 15 years is the third eye and the pineal gland, and the fact that that's the highest energy, the highest vibrational organ, and receives the most blood flow in the body. And it was really kind of interesting when they were doing autopsies and they found the little crystal inside the pineal gland, that's really your main connection point to the universal consciousness, or your communication, and on a higher level. And of course, Dave, that leads you down so many rabbit holes, right? And that led us down the rabbit hole of, well, what's going on with the calcification of the pineal gland, with the fluoride in the water, and then all the brominated compounds. And so that's another reason why I started looking into things that could decalcify the pineal gland, and iodine.
What's your favorite way to decalcify the pineal? By the way, if you're listening to this going, what the heck's he talking about? Everything he's talking about, there's substantial groups of people who are saying this is going on. There's also substantial groups of people saying this is all a bunch of woo. The truth is usually in the middle from what I've seen. But
yeah.
What have you found works to make your pineal gland work, and how do you know it's working?
My favorite substance, probably if I had to pick one thing, would be iodine, as far as its ability to decalcify the pineal gland, because it is the halogen. You have the fluoride, bromine, chloride, and iodine, and a good form of iodine is what I've found has the ability to decalcify the pineal gland. And not only that, every cell in the body requires iodine, and that's. Do
you like Lugol's, or do you use it topically? Do you take it orally? How much do you take?
Yeah, so I actually developed a nascent iodine, which is in a certified organic glycerin base, and it was the first certified organic iodine product on the market. However, Lugol's, I love Lugol's. I just didn't want I wanted to kind of increase and come up with my own innovation in iodine, or with iodine. So, and I think that, and Dr. Brownstein, who's a friend of mine, who's been doing massive amounts of studies on thyroid and endocrine dysfunction.
Yeah, big name in that field, right?
And iodine. Him and I both agree that about 25 milligrams a day is really, really good for anybody. And that's 25,000 micrograms. So I know that sounds like a lot, but anybody who's suffering from endocrine disruption. And now we know that iodine can start pulling out mercury, lead, cadmium, strontium from the body. We also now have anecdotal evidence now from people that suffer from EMF hypersensitivity syndrome that have tried everything out there, and they're getting the best results with taking iodine.
Now, that dose of iodine is larger than I've seen from almost anyone. The largest dose that I've seen recommended is some like 14 or 18 milligrams from some of the books on adrenal fatigue and problems. But people with Hashimoto's are usually told, don't take any iodine. It might make your Hashimoto's worse. What's your take on that?
My take is they're not getting the proper iodine testing done. Dr. Brownstein and Dr. Guy Abraham are the ones that developed the only iodine loading test. And there's only one facility, I think, now in the United States that does that testing. If people go in and get blood iodine testing, it's not accurate. What I think is, and what we've seen, is that when you start taking iodine, your body's going to start pulling out all the brominated compounds and the fluoride, and it can take up to 6 months to a year before your thyroid levels come back to normal. And what you usually see is if the individual is going into the doctor, their endocrinologist, and getting all of their iodine precursors and all their T3, T4, and TSH and all that, you usually see it go in a cycle like this. So, and that's the reason why the endocrinologists say, oh, get off the iodine, because you're going to have Hashimoto's, you're going to have hyper, then you're going to have hypo, and it's just going to cycle itself until all of those toxic halogens are out of the system and your body's able to repair itself again. But just like with fibrocystic PCOS and fibrocystic breasts and anything reproductive, I mean, that's just a telltale sign of severe iodine deficiency. And mental retardation in children, I mean, it's you could pretty much link iodine deficiency to every single health condition.
It's true in my my book on fertility called The Better Baby Book from like 2011. You look at what even slightly low iodine does to lower IQ. There were studies, okay, guys, this is 10 years ago from writing, but if I'm remembering this right, there was something like an average of 5 IQ points globally lower than we should be, just because of parts of the world where kids don't get enough iodine when they're in the womb. So there's definitely something to be said for it. Most functional medicine doctors I know don't go as high as the doses you're talking about. And what I have found is whether I'm using it topically, you just rub it on your arm, or whether you're drinking it in water, is that when you hit your limit for the day, and mine is far lower than that, you get water like coming out of your nose. It's not like your nose is running. It's like you have water in your nose. It's the weirdest thing. But at that point, you sort of hit your limit. And I did go through for years, I would take high dose iodine, and I feel like I kind of hit my limit on that. I take iodine and make some iodine capsules that are 150 micrograms or something. But if I do even 3 drops on my arm, I get a runny nose. So I feel like I finally reached iodine sufficiency. But most people listening are woefully low on it. Iodized sea salt isn't going to do much for. Actually, sea salt has no iodine, but even iodized chemical salt is not going to do a lot for you because it's just such a low dose. Okay, so you're a big fan of that, all right? And what is nascent iodine versus all the other forms? Because there's many forms of iodine you can get.
Nascent iodine is just an I1 instead of an I2, or it's not bonded to something. So iodine in its original form can be a gas, and it can be toxic if it's coming out in the crystalline form. So you really have to take it through a detoxification process or a bonding process. And it's very hard actually to stabilize a I1 instead of a bonded iodide or like a potassium iodide. But with lots of experimentation, we were able to utilize and invent actually a new form of processing, which is a glycerospheric, like a lipospheric, but this is a glycerospheric technology where we're actually able to wrap the glycerin molecule around the iodine and stabilize it. And it's normally, if you were to just put iodine crystals in something and you don't detoxify it, it can be like the iodine you get at the drugstore, which you do not want to drink. It's good for your skin. But this is an active form of iodine, which means it's the I1 with a strong electron ability. So that means it goes in and it actually helps detoxify and helps repair any damaged tissue a lot faster. Now, that's not to say that Lugol's, which is a combination of free iodine and potassium iodide, doesn't work. Actually, Lugol's was the first antibiotic. I mean, we submitted a 17-page paper to the White House for iodine's effectiveness against COVID-19. And if you look at the studies back in around the Spanish flu, it was incredible. I mean, there's no microorganism that can survive in an iodine-rich environment. And that brings me to your point about the biotoxins and the mold and the fungus. When we were doing our research, and iodine for that as well, on the root cause of disease, and we finished it all, we basically came to the conclusion of common sense and simplicity. Mm-hmm. The root cause of all disease, in our opinion, is toxic air, toxic food, toxic water, toxic beverages, heavy metals, chemical exposure, electromagnetic frequency exposure, microbial infestation. Microbial infestation is huge. Fungus, mold, parasites, bacteria, viruses, mycoplasms, physical and emotional stress levels, and negative belief patterns. I mean, that pretty much was the conclusion. And that, back in the mid-90s, they were like, well, what do you mean toxicity? How can that be the root cause of disease? Well, we knew that everybody had a self-healing mechanism. I mean, this is kind of what we found out, is that we're all born with the ability to heal ourselves. We all have a self-healing mechanism. And if someone's taking in 200,000 toxins from air every day, 200,000 toxins from water and food and all this, it's stuffing up our body with all these chemicals and toxins. And at the same time, we found that people weren't eliminating. So the next step that we went to was we knew that all of these things were the root cause. But then we looked at, well, how does the body actually eliminate these things naturally? And so men have 4 elimination routes and women have 5 elimination routes. So you're going to sweat them out. You're going to breathe them out with respiration, which is through your exercise that those you can do together. You're going to urinate them out and you're going to defecate them out. And with women, they have their menstrual cycle once a month. So we said, okay, so let's say someone's bringing in 2 million toxins on a daily basis. Let's look at what's going on. Well, this person's sick. They have all kinds of symptoms. How much are they urinating? Well, they're only urinating, they're not drinking any water, number one. So their urination their urination elimination is shut down. How much are they defecating? Well, they're not eating the right foods. They're clogging up their system. They're eating, and it's taking over 72 hours transit time, which means the proteins are turning putrefactic, the carbohydrates are fermenting, the fats are turning rancid inside their system. They're having one bowel movement a week, maybe one bowel movement every couple of days. So they're
How common is that? I don't know anyone who like poops every 2 or 3 days. Is it just because all my friends are healthy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just look at the animals, right? The animals that eat good live things, right? How many times does a bird poop? How many times does a cow poop? A horse poop? I mean, they do 2 or 3 times a day.
Right. So I raise animals, right? The sheep, they poop every 5 minutes because they're just re-inoculating the soil. Pigs, a lot less frequently. And they all do it in the same spot in the corner because their job is to dig up the soil, not to refertilize it. So I wouldn't compare us there, but I mean, other primates, do they poop, 10 times a day? I guess because they're all eating bamboo or something.
Yes, they do. They do. And of course, like you always say, everybody's different and everybody's biochemistry is different. And so it just depends on your environment, really. To come to the conclusion of our research, when we figured out that most people that are sick, their elimination routes aren't functioning properly. So all of this stuff ends up being stored somewhere in the body, and that's what leads to the root cause of disease. So the next thing we said is, okay, well, where is most of this stuff coming into the body? And we said, okay, it can come in through the skin, it can come in through the lungs, and it can come in through the mouth.
Or through social media. You forgot that. No,
well, actually, yes, because you're right, because that's part of the physical and emotional stress aspect of it, which is huge.
Yeah.
And the negative belief patterns and the fear and the anger and the shame and all that stuff.
Yeah, but we'll stick to the physical toxins. I was just kind of messing with you.
So anyway, we found that about 90% of all the chemicals and toxins enter through the intestinal tract at that point in time, because even a lot of the stuff you breathe in gets in the mucus and leaks down into your stomach. So then, of course, it was, this is the biggest secret the medical profession hopes you never find out, right? I mean, the intestinal lining. So let's start studying that. Let's figure out what's going on and when the intestinal lining is exposed to all these chemicals and toxins. And as we know now, leaky gut and the burning of the nerves, and people are eating in a sympathetic state instead of a parasympathetic state. And so we realize that there's a lot of education that has to happen, as well as a lot of cleansing and detoxification that has to happen. And one of the things that we found that was the most success and the most successful protocols that these doctors were using is the real successful doctors were always cleansing the body before they did everything else. And they would start in the intestines and then move on to the liver and gallbladder, and then move on to cleaning all the harmful organisms out, and then move on to cleaning all the chemicals and heavy metals out of the system. So that's what led us to, okay, how could we keep, if people are, number one, like you say, eating way too much food, and they're eating bad cooked food with low energy and low vibration, how can we keep the intestines clean and functioning? And when we did our search, we had already known about Tesla's product that he developed, and that was something that was safe. It's not an osmotic laxative. I mean, even though it's bonded to magnesium, it's not a magnesium laxative, and it's not a magnesium supplement because you don't absorb magnesium oxide. Tesla knew that the lattices on the magnesium molecule would absorb and hold oxygen. And so I only had a little bit of that formula, actually. And I set up a lab in a 40-foot shipping container. And it took me 4 years. I almost blew myself up a couple times, too, to figure out how to stabilize the monatomic oxygen onto the magnesium molecule. And so that actually, the Oxy Powder is Nikola Tesla's formula. And when you take it, it slowly releases the oxygen throughout the whole intestinal tract.
Now, you mentioned ozone, which is O3, and you mentioned monatomic ozone, which is basically O. So you're taking magnesium oxide, which is, well, we need magnesium, but oxide doesn't absorb that well as a supplement. Right. So this is less about the magnesium. Yes. And so what's on there? Are these just individual O's that came off the ozones? So now you have single O's tied to magnesium, or are there O3s stuck on there?
So there's an energetic value that we haven't been able to really measure yet, but most of it is the only thing that we can measure in the lab is going to be when the O1s come off and they turn into O2. And we've measured that for 17 hours straight. That's happening, and so we know that you're going to get a good cleanse. That's why you take it at night, and it cleans everything out and it turns all that solid matter.
You sent me some. I looked at all the research going back to like 1987, and there's a good amount of research on this. It's not well known, and yes, Tesla really was working on this kind of stuff. We also had Ian Mitchell was on recently. You probably haven't heard that episode yet, where he talked about the way Tesla was doing a similar thing with different oils. So Tesla was definitely a health nut, but I was unfamiliar with putting it on magnesium, and when I took the Oxy Powder, definitely the next day, I normally poop a couple times a day. But there was definitely like 3 times. So I would say it was a noticeable difference. How do you know it's good though? Like, how do you know you're not messing with good bacteria in the gut when you cleanse?
Well, we have lots of anecdotal evidence. We haven't had one report ever that anyone's gotten colon cancer in the 20-something years that we've been selling Oxy Powder. And we also look at the facultative strains. I mean, the microbiome, a good microbiome in the body is a good balance of some bad bacteria, some good bacteria, a good balanced system. And oxygen has not been proven, or I haven't seen anything to cause any type of damage to the microbiome. Just the opposite. It seems like the reports that we've gotten are that it helps heal leaky gut. We did do a study in India that on ulcerative colitis had a 98.6 cure rate, chronic constipation, Crohn's. I mean, think of all of the intestinal situations that people are suffering from today and all of the damage and all of the chemicals and everything. So we also know that when it's done, you could picture it like the scrubbing bubbles commercial kind of a thing. And most people have, 10, 15 pounds sometimes of compacted fecal matter, that hard stuff. There's nothing that I know of that's actually going to melt away all that. And let's say you go in and you get a colonic. Well, what we found is a lot of the toxicity happens in the small intestine. And there's really no way to really deeply clean that. And then you actually get the oxygen coming into your bloodstream. So you will notice increased energy, and maybe if you use a pulse oximeter, which I know you do, even increase in oxygen capacity.
Is there enough oxygen molecules in here to move that needle? It seems like breathing is so much more air coming in. Like this would be more about delivering it to the right part of the body rather than you can't compress that much oxygen.
Yeah, right? It's not something I would say you could use as an oxygen supplement, but you will notice energy. I mean, I'm a big fan of Wim Hof breathing and breathing exercises too. And so in conjunction,
I definitely noticed an energy difference when I took it. You say take it at night. You say 4 capsules 2 to 3 times a week. Why at night? Why shouldn't I just take it now?
You can. We have people use it for all kinds of things. At night, just because you're relaxed and your bowels are in a parasympathetic state most of the time, hopefully, if you're getting some good sleep, and your digestion slows way down. So it's easy that way. And also it gives you the opportunity to kind of clean everything out that you ate during the day and oxidize anything that needs to be oxidized in there or anything that's harmful or anything that's positively charged that's harmful. And you just, while you sleep, you get up in the morning, you flush it out. That way during the day, you might have 1 or 2 bowel movements, but then during the day, you're not having to run to the bathroom. And if you take it, which some people actually do, Dave. I mean, we have a lot of people that are meat. They go out and they eat a big meat dinner with lots of carbohydrates. I'm in Houston, so it's oil and gas. They drink a couple bottles of wine. They have dessert. They're still at the restaurant at 10:30 at night. They come home and they're just bloated, and then they just want to flush out their system. So they might take 6 or 7 capsules.
I'll
just
try
flush
6
out.
now. I've only done 4 before bed, but I'm kind of curious. What's going to happen if I take 6 of these?
Nothing. You'll just have increased bowel movements. We had a doctor that was giving his patients a half a bottle one day and a half a bottle the next day, and he swore by it.
Well, just magnesium oxide is going to give you the runs at that level, right?
It might. Yeah, it might.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I did notice something, and the story behind this, we kind of got into it a little bit, but can you talk about Eugene Blass and Nikola Tesla in 1898, like the real early way that they worked together on this stuff? Because it's interesting to me when we find old technologies like ozone therapy, like iodine, like these other things that have been around for hundreds or thousands of years, like activated charcoal, and they're experiencing a resurgence because they work at fundamental foundational levels. So tell me how this stuff happened, what Homozone and all that. That story is very fascinating to me.
Yeah, Homozone was the original oxygen blast that, it was changed a couple times over the years, and George Freibot was producing the Homozone. But nobody really has a lot of information on how long it took with Tesla working with Eugene Blass. We know it was in 1898. We know that they originally formulated the product in a hotel room, but there's not a lot of evidence out there, at least paper-wise, that what their relationship, at least I don't know what their relationship really was. I know that they did sell the product on the market for quite some time, and then also Tesla was working with the Vapozone machine at the same time, which is an ozone machine for respiratory. That's probably my favorite device. If you look at it online, it's very hard to find information on that, but I build them. But it's basically a nebulizer type device hooked to an ozone machine. And you put oil in it, tea tree oil, a little bit of eucalyptus, and you bubble it through there and you breathe it into the lungs. I've used it and recommended it for years. By the way, I'll go back in time a little bit and let you know that when we presented this research, we were given a gag order. We were followed around in black vehicles. We were told to shut our mouths about it because we had a cure for cancer and a cure for all disease basically back in the mid 90s, and many people have. I mean, there's lots of different ways to heal the body. But what we realized is that a true doctor is one who teaches, not one who prescribes. And a true doctor is really, or a true scientist that wants to change the world, is really more of a internal and external toxicologist, because you really have to understand and be able to teach, what people are exposed to in their external environment. I mean, in their home, the VOCs, the EMFs, the memory foam mattress they're breathing in fumes from, the air fresheners, the amount of physical and emotional stress in their external environment. And then you also have to be able to explain to them the internal environment as well. And we opened up a clinic, actually. We were renegades back then, and we had a very successful degenerative disease clinic and cancer clinic. And we had the royal family come over. We had a lot of people that would come to us. Actually, pretty much everybody that came to us had already been seen by 20 different people and had bags of supplements. And that only lasted a couple years before the FDA raided our clinic and shut us down and basically said, you can't do this anymore. And I remember one instance where a guy pulled up in a black car and asked me very nicely to get in a black suit. And it took me to a little Chinese restaurant in Houston. And on the wall, I saw pictures of presidents and all kinds of, high-end people. And I was thinking, what the heck are they doing in this tiny little Chinese restaurant? And the back wall opened up, and they brought me in and sat me down, and they said, we
The
know
back wall
that,
opened up like a magic
yeah,
Men in Black
like
switch.
and it opened up,
Oh
and
my
I
God.
and I went in there, and they said, we know what you're working on. We've been watching you. We know that what you have going on. They knew about they knew about our technology, the Tesla stuff. They knew about some other stuff, and they basically said, we want you to join us. You'll never have to worry about money again. We'll take care of you. And I mean, I had known by that point, because when you start going down the rabbit hole, it's a small group of people that run the world and that, are doing a lot of this stuff to the earth and society and organizations, which was another thing I had to go through.
I have a hard time processing this, right? You're sitting here telling me this. So, I mean, they didn't kill you. Did you say, fine, I'll sign up. I'll get my microchip implant. I mean, like what happened?
No, they gave me a phone number. They gave me a phone number, and they said, you have 24 hours to call this number. If you don't call the number in 24 hours, we're never going to reach out to you again. And I was like, I already knew who these guys were. They're trying to silence me. They're probably going to kill me, whatever. So I never called the number, and I never heard from them again, except from that point forward, the FDA's been in my office like every 6 months. They watch me pretty closely about, because I speak at Truth About Cancer, and I speak all, about 5G and all the stuff, that a lot of the same stuff that you talk about. So I had to shut our clinic down at that point in time. But I said, you know what? Actually, that's right when the internet was starting. Like I remember AOL and Netscape.
You've got
I said,
mail.
I'm going to reframe this into the simplicity, because I'm all about simplicity of teaching people how to heal themselves, and just put the information up under wellness and use the same detoxification protocols that we used, and then develop products that I felt comfortable with. Because a lot of the products out there, remember, Dave, in the mid 90s and even in the 2000s, they were crappy. They had fillers and excipients and binders. And so that's how I got into product development and manufacturing products too, is because I wanted clean products. We were the first company to start coming out with the seals on the bottles. We were the first one that developed fillers and excipients using certified organic gum acacia and even diatomaceous earth sometimes, and other things like that, to be able to create like really powerful, clean, high vibrational supplements that are out there. So that's what led me to, starting Global Healing, and then educating people on the root cause of disease and how they can clean up their external environment and how they can clean up their internal environment at the same time, and take back control of their health and reactivate their body's self-healing mechanism.
Is that Chinese restaurant still open?
It sure is. Yes, it is.
You ever
I pass
go in
by
there
every now and then.
You ever go in there and knock on the back sliding wall?
No, no. I don't really want to go in there.
Do you want to tell
much.
people the address or anything?
Probably not.
I know there's a bunch of listeners in Houston who go there and order the chow mein and look at the wall with the infrared lights or something. That's fascinating. Wow.
But actually, over the years, and I used to think that healing was difficult, and it was. I mean, we had 600 supplements at one point in time, but then over the years, we started realizing that it's really not that difficult once you just clean things up and you start reactivating the body's self-healing mechanism. And when we did have our clinic, one of the interesting things that we noticed is we would always sit down and do a 2-hour interview. And we actually went to the patient's home too. And I can't tell you how many times we found black air conditioned vents in their home. And
toxic mold is such a big thing.
It is huge. It is humongous. So we did it the old school way. And what we found was people would come in, and during the initial evaluation, the initial consult, the initial exams, our diagnosis that we came up with was maybe 2 or 3 things that they were complaining of. Then we would put all of them on a cleanse program, starting with cleansing and healing the gut, then moving into cleansing the liver. And we, really looked at Hulda Clark's research with the liver flukes and all that, and kind of modified a liver cleanse program, made it more organic and clean than the one that she was using.
Okay.
And then
and just for listeners, Hulda Clark, she wrote this book, was it The Cure for All Diseases?
Yeah.
Was that?
Yeah.
And I read this
Diseases.
in the mid 90s, and she was, frankly, kind of a crazy person. And by the way, a lot of the real advanced healers are at least half crazy.
Yeah.
And she's, you have solvents, they're causing you to get parasites, and you need to do this crazy liver cleanse, which involves drinking the equivalent of salad dressing. It's grapefruit juice and huge amounts of olive oil and taking Epsom salts. It'll be the worst night of your life. And the next morning you're shitting out all these little green rocks that someone later proved are mostly coagulated olive oil because they did it with beet juice. Others say they're liver stones. But what I can tell you is that when I did that, this was at the height of living in a moldy house. I didn't know that mold was the issue with me back then, or was one of the issues. I woke up that next morning, despite a really gurgly, uncomfortable night. And for the first time in 5 years, my upper back, between my shoulder blades, I had felt 24 hours a day like there was a candle burning back. It was hot, painful, really uncomfortable. And I just grit my teeth, and I was in pain all the time from that. It was gone. And it was gone for a couple hours that day. And it was like, manna from heaven, like finally. And what I think happened is she stimulated with that cleanse, at least stimulated a huge amount of bile flow. And there's a lot of toxins in bile. And some of the core techniques that I talk about, even with just activated charcoal, it's sticking to bile, which is where toxins recirculate. So Hulda Clark was onto something with that cleanse. Then again, her little zapper thing, where she also said, run this little thing. So I went to Radio Shack and I bought all the things and I soldered together my own electrical zapper, and the thing didn't do shit. Right. And I don't think those work at all, but electrical medicine has efficacy. And it's one of those things where, okay, Tesla did some cool stuff, but then you add Venus in there and you're like, God, how do you sort out the BS from what's real? Like, how do you do it?
I really have learned to rely a lot on anecdotal evidence. I mean, how people feel. Are they getting better?
Let's call it clinical evidence.
So let's call it clinical evidence. I mean, I could tell you we've done probably over 500,000 liver cleanses. One of the things that we've learned from the liver cleanses, actually, and especially nowadays, is that I could say, I don't have scientific data behind this, but I could say pretty confidently that the majority of people's livers right now on the planet are only working at around 15%, including children, by the way. We're seeing non-alcoholic fatty liver disease through the roof. I mean, the livers are just completely congested. And with a value, we've had the evidence of hundreds of thousands of people that we've been able to evaluate by taking them through these cleanse programs over the last 20-something years. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we came to the conclusion that one liver cleanse is only really going to regenerate about 15% of the liver. So we changed our program to now 3 liver cleanses, because if someone's liver is only functioning at around 20%, then you do one, it's going to go up to 35. You do another one, it's going to go up to 50. Then you do another one, it's going to go up to 65.
Just from these liver cleanses, or
just from the liver
Oxy Powder, or like when you say cleanse, the olive oil thing?
Yeah. So the intestinal cleanse program is nothing more than really avoiding putting a bunch of crap in your intestines during your cleansing and using the Oxy Powder with a good probiotic. That's basically the intestinal cleanse. Intestinal maintenance on Oxy Powder is, I think, people should take it 1 or 2 times a week or something just to keep everything clean. That's the first step, because you always have to start with the intestinal tract. Once you get that clean, then the liver can actually dump, and then you move on to the liver. And so the liver, we did for years, did 1 liver cleanse, but now we're finding that 3 liver cleanses is really what it takes to get the liver kicked back in.
That was my experience. I did 3 of them once every weekend, 3 weekends in a row. And I was out of pain at least 50% of the time. And I know now that knotting of the upper back there is highly correlated with congested liver. And I also know that mycotoxins from your environment will clog the liver up like nothing else. When I say clog the liver, I'm talking about glutathione, P450 pathways, and the glucuronation pathways, which is why some of the original Bulletproof lifestyle writings are: take your activated charcoal to bind to bile, take your liposomal glutathione, and take your calcium D-glucarate, so that you can turn on those detox pathways. But I haven't written a lot about liver cleanses because, man, that sure sucked. But okay, so you could stack Oxy Powder with a liver cleanse,
Yes.
And I've also seen people say ozonated olive oil. You should put some of that in there as well. Good idea? Bad idea?
I love ozonated olive oil. Most people aren't doing it long enough. They just call it, there's a difference between ozonated olive oil and ozol, O-Z-O-L.
Mm-hmm.
Ozonated olive oil is highly effective. You can drink it, you can put it on your skin, it's great. But in order to do what Tesla's original formula was to create ozol, you actually changed all the molecular composition of the olive oil to an ozol compound, which is C10H18O3, and it is stabilized. And that's what we produce. We have, I think, one of the largest ozone labs at our facility in Phoenix. And we use all glass vessels to do all of our processing, because one of the other things I didn't tell you was about Paracelsus. I mean, Paracelsus is another person that we pretty much studied in depth with his alchemy and Philosopher's Stone stuff. And very interesting how he could bring plants back to life by purifying the ashes and then adding the ashes back into the tinctures. And, over a period of time, you can turn the bottle upside down and you can see the crystals growing off of it. I think that's kind of what we're working on, is the next generation of vibrationally powerful supplements. But to get back to your question regarding the ozonated olive oil, yes, you can do that, and it's great. If you take the ozol, it's even better. And we actually do recommend the day, after you drink the olive oil, the next morning on the liver cleanse, then you take the Oxy Powder to kind of help flush everything back out of the system. And so,
one thing Hulda Clark wrote about was that if you didn't take anti-parasitic herbs like wormwood and artemisinin and things like that before, that you were going to be in for a world of hurt when you did the liver flush, because in her unusual view of the world, there'd be flukes or something in the liver that a lot of Western medicine can't detect. But we do have a major parasite problem. People don't even look at it anymore. Different topic. But I will say that the one time I tried it without taking anti-parasitic herbs first, it sucked. Like, it was much worse than the other times. So there's something going on there. And just for people listening, I'll actually post the recipe to do this. I think it is a good idea to do Oxy Powder afterwards, or anything that's going to help cleanse the gut. It's probably a good idea to take charcoal as well. But I'll just tell you, if you guys decide to do it, it's better to work with a functional medicine person or something. It's kind of a uncomfortable process, but for people who are really toxic, it seems to help. Okay, so you're a big fan of doing those things, and you would start with the gut, then you move to the liver. What about kidneys? People are eating kale like no one's business. They're getting kidney stones all over the place. What do you do for kidneys?
Well, what we found is after the liver, then we go into the harmful organism cleanse. People, and this over the years we found is one of the main contributors. It basically verifies what Reif was saying, that all disease has harmful organisms associated with it. We do that because we know that the liver's semi-clean, we know the bowel's clean, and then we use our antifungals, our antiparasiticals, and all that stuff to kind of clean out the body of all those harmful organisms. What we found is, people that were raw foodists, or they were juicing all the time, they were like, "Oh, I'm so healthy. My body's alkaline. I'm not going to have any fungus, or I'm not going to have any parasites, or I'm not going to have anything in my system." Well, they do. And what happens is these organisms, a lot of them secrete isopropyl alcohol as a byproduct. So if you have hundreds of trillions of organisms in your body and they're all going to the bathroom in your body's, I don't care what you do, if you juice all day, your body's going to stay acidic, because you're going to have high levels of isopropyl alcohol, you're going to have phenol, you're going to have formaldehyde, and you're going to have all kinds of toxic compounds being secreted by these organisms.
What do you think about combating viral infections that shall not be named?
I had the opportunity to be on the task force that was created with a lot of your friends. I won't say their names, but really good doctors that we started looking at the research early on in the COVID. And as you know, it wasn't making sense. And, all the mask issue and all the lockdown issue. And we were looking at a lot of the stuff, hydroxychloroquine, zinc, vitamin D, cleansing the body. I mean, USC, actually, talking about simplicity and immune health, USC, I think it was a couple years ago, came out with that water fasting study on immune health. 72-hour water-only fast regenerates your immune system and produces immune stem cells. So, I think the fasting can be very effective for that. And the immune health programs that many doctors were coming up with, there's a lot of different factors that can be used for viruses. And along the same lines of what we've all been talking about, zinc, iodine, vitamin C, vitamin D. I personally am a huge fan of charcoal, like you. Like I've been working with a company over the last 6 months, which is a supercharged C60, which is a fullerene molecule. It's called Graphex, and it literally has 26 layers like an onion around the molecule. And the absorptive quality, this company's been around actually for a while, and it's amazing. We're working on a product right now. But activated charcoal is just, some of the cheapest, most effective things like diatomaceous earth, activated charcoal, sunlight, water, meditation. These are all things that don't cost any money, yet have profound healing effects on the body.
Your set of products at Global Healing is, I'm going to call it esoteric, for lack of a better word. You've got all kinds of stuff that has neat little biohacking, ancient knowledge built into them. So if you love the stuff on the show and you're saying, what's the future of supplements look like? You actually look at the history of supplementation and you look at the future at the same time. So I'm kind of fascinated. It's you go there and you look at what's happening, and the compounds have these little things that are in them, like you just talked about glucose oxidase. And like you, I'm a fan of systemic proteolytic enzymes. We're not going to get into it today, but you've done a meaningful amount of fasting. You have a book on fasting, long water fasts. My book on fasting called Fast This Way comes out in January. And I actually recommend people take a protease, basically protein digesting systemic enzymes while they're fasting, because the body can use those for more rapid repair and cleaning up gunk. And there you go. You're recommending the same things. Those are also relatively unknown, except for things like fighting blood clots, like serrapeptase. So there's kind of a wealth of exploration to be done on your work with Global Healing, because when you're looking at the cutting edge that may or may not include Venus, but you're doing it for since the 90s, whatever that is, that's 30 years, you end up with a set of esoteric products that have some of them stood the test of time, others are just experimental and new. But I'm always just fascinated, interested in that. So I want to say thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me on. We could talk all day about different types of technologies and stuff like that. And I really appreciate spending time with you. You're awesome to talk to. And maybe we'll get to talk again sometime.
Most definitely. And for the record, no one has ever taken me to the back of a Chinese restaurant and offered me to join a global cabal of evil. And I think that must just be because I'm not doing enough. I don't know.
No, I think you're doing a lot. You're just, the thing is, when you start messing with the big C word, the cancer, it raises a lot of eyebrows.
Yeah, there's a long history of people solving that problem and then it getting unsolved, which is very strange. But when you dig into the details and you actually know the people, which you do and which I do, there is some things going on that are not kosher. I will put it that way. I also appreciate that you extended a 15% discount for people listening to this, at least if you order something before December 15th of 2020. Go to globalhealing.com/Dave. Get a discount. Try the Oxy Powder. It's interesting. You do feel good on it, and you will poop more, which is pretty cool. And there's a bunch of other cool products there that are full of stuff you generally don't see, which is pretty neat. So you've got a very eclectic, esoteric, and well thought through set of things you're working on. And just thanks for making those available, because those are things you don't find in most places.
Yeah. Well, thanks for everything that you've done. You've educated, oh my gosh, way more people than we have. And it's so nice to see that, everybody's working together and everybody's on the same page, and the people that really truly care, and they're doing it from the heart, just because we want to help as many people as we can.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about. And I will see you on Venus.
All right, let's meet up. We might find some other cool stuff up there.
If you like today's episode, you know what to do. Poop. Okay. Well, you could try the Oxy Powder. You could check out some of the research we talked about. You can Google Homozone and look at the history of Royal Reif. Look at the history of Tesla and healing. A lot of people don't know that Tesla had one of the world's first whole body vibration platforms. And he would warn people, don't get on there and turn it up too much because, well, I think in Tesla's lingo, he said, you'll shit yourself, because he had the frequency figured out that stimulated your bowels. It's 8 hertz, by the way. And it's hilarious, but today we're still using vibration platforms. So I just want you guys to think about this. Maybe we've known some stuff for a long time. The stuff about the AMA taking out Royal Reif's research, that is real and it happened. So open your mind. A lot of what we talked about here, you may just be like, I've never heard of that. And if you are thinking that can't be, therefore it isn't, you are falling into the scientific dogma trap. And a real scientist says, not it can't be, but that's curious. Is it really? And that kind of curiosity is what will make you into a biohacker. I'll see you on the next episode.